Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Report. We do have a great show for you tonight. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Agliolo. How are you, Daniela?
I'm good, thank you. Looking forward to tonight, listening to Mark.
Oh, yeah. Our guest for this evening, a man that needs a little introduction, coming to us all the way from South Florida. He is a writer. He's a filmmaker. He is a guide. He's done so many things. One of the most prolific researchers in Bigfoot today or ever, period. Mr. Mark ZASKEY. Welcome, Mark.
I appreciate the intro, man. That was really nice. It's
well, you know,
coming, right?
It's all true. Most of it.
How you doing, Daniela?
I'm good. Good to meet you.
It's good to be here, guys.
All right. Well, before we get started, just want to remind everybody in the chat, you guys keep it clean for us. No fighting back and forth amongst each other. We do have the best moderators on YouTube, and we don't want them timing you out, probably. So, Mark, man, a lot of stuff we have to talk about. I actually see us probably going over our hour tonight, and that's, you know, I think most of our viewers are going to enjoy that. So let's just dive right into it. I tell everybody, you want to see a Bigfoot, go watch Mark ZASKEY's stuff. And then Mark ZASKEY takes all this stuff off of YouTube. So people want to see your stuff, man. Where can they see it?
Well, we have a funding site, cryptoreality.us, and that's where we put 99% of our content. We also have film on Amazon, and we're working on our own channel. Here in the next month or so, we should have our own channel on Amazon Prime, so you're going to be able to view it there. But I think maybe it's a good time to explain some of what was going on with the YouTube.
Yeah, man, sure. I think people want to know. Absolutely.
Okay, well, from the beginning, 5 years ago, we signed a partnership agreement with them, and it was very clear on my end, and we've abided by that since day one. And we understand that, you know, there are certain videos that when you put them out, if there's profanity or whatever it is, that they can't place ads for the viewpoints of their sponsors and that kind of thing. But from the beginning, it's been a real struggle with dealing with this subject and YouTube in particular. We noticed that we were doing real well. And the views were starting to climb. The channel was starting to grow. The subscribers, I mean, we were getting 500-600 subscribers a month, thousands of views on videos, great feedback from people. People seem to be enjoying the content, which is really derived from a lot of hard work. And then suddenly we started to get notifications from YouTube and emails from YouTube that our channel was being sabotaged. From that point forward, YouTube was useless to Crypto Reality. I think what really was going on in the first 3 years was, you know, everybody knows we have a contingency of individuals out there that for one reason or another have difficulty with the subject or any researchers, that kind of thing. And so we started to have some difficulties there. But in particular, it seemed, based on what we were seeing, that our videos were simply being shut down. We would get a certain amount of views, and then that was it. And they would shut it off. It just seemed like it was shut off. One day, all of a sudden, it would flatline in the analytics program. And so, you know, we had already had our funding site, which is really what drives the research. I mean, Kerry, you of all people, you know, this is an expensive thing to undertake, and not only with the time and the time away from your family and the time in inhospitable environments, but financially, it's ridiculous. You know, the equipment's expensive. So any kind of a study requires funding. And if you're going to take it seriously the way we wanted to, we needed that. So we had cryptoreality.us. So it wasn't really that big of a deal. But every once in a while we would come back to see if anything changed. And we noticed these patterns over and over and over again, where our videos would start to do well, and then it was like a switch was turned off, and suddenly it would just go away in one day. And that to me doesn't seem normal. We started doing research on the algorithms they use and paying close attention to what was going on. And we had some really obvious instances where we collected visual evidence through screen captures that something was going on with our channel behind the scenes at YouTube. And when it became clear enough and obvious enough was when we made the decision. That was about 2 weeks ago. I finally had evidence that the viewers were being presented one aspect of information, or one data set would be a better way to put it. And what we were seeing in our actual analytics program was something completely different. It was almost as if they were presenting 10 times the amount of subscribers we had to our viewers. Certain viewers, some viewers. Anyway, I had people on this, and I got a bunch of screen captures where they were saying we had 1.3 million subscribers, 235,000 subscribers. And these people were seeing this and going, why do you say they're screwing you? This isn't what it appears to be. But behind the scenes in our analytics, we had just cleared 10,000 subscribers. We had months where hundreds of subscribers were being taken from us. At the end of the month, our data would say we lost 3 for the whole month. And the number at the end of the month would be several hundred. And when they wouldn't answer any questions for us, it just became obvious it was time to go. So Melanie and I work hard at this, and we want to educate the public on it. But in the end, if we're working hard and the work goes nowhere, there's no actual reason for us to be there. So we're looking for platforms that are a little less controlled, I think is the way to put it. I've been running tests on Amazon for about 12 months since we put our first film on there, and they seem to be a little more reliable and not censoring the information. So we're moving there. Amazon Prime. We're going to have the Crypto Reality channel on Amazon Prime.
Well, I think we're probably going to be doing something similar. We'll keep the live show on YouTube, obviously, for announcements and things like that. And but I think we're probably going to start taking the documentaries and the docuseries to Patreon. And it's going to cost people $1 a show. So, I mean, it will help. You and I talked about this earlier, what people don't realize when you go and you travel. I mean, you just went to Maine, especially driving. They don't think about how many times that you pulled over and put $200 worth of diesel in your truck,
Yeah.
4 or 5 times on the way. And that most of that expense that it takes and recovering some of that, YouTube's just not doing it. They're just not doing it. And so, for us to continue, we're not rich. We have careers and we do okay. And we really try hard not to make it about money. But what YouTube has done, especially on this last doc, what they did to us, love you, YouTube, but it's just not fair. It's not right. It's not a partnership by any stretch.
Yeah,
let it's supposed to be anyway. So
it's different too. I just want to say this too, real quick. It's different when I was doing this kind of stuff on the weekends, and I wasn't engaged in the way I am now. I mean, I'm doing this. This is my profession. One of the reasons that you can view what you can view in our work is that I'm about this 24/7, 365. Until this study concludes and I'm satisfied, it's going to be that way. And then we'll move on to the next cryptid, But in looking at this is my job. You know what I mean? So funding is particularly important because I don't have that benefit of the 40-hour work week coming in. This is what I do. So it's particularly important for the funding of the research that we do have a platform that's actually going to do what they say they're going to do. So we can continue, obviously.
And it might be different, if you didn't have something that was worth seeing or worth paying $1 or whatever it is to see. There's a lot of people that do this and try this, and it's just a bunch of walking around through the woods. But let's segue into your research just a little bit. Now, I've been in the woods with you. Personally, you're actually, I can credit Mark Zasky for getting me into the woods for the first time in 10 years at the time. What do you think is different? Because I know you've researched all over. What is different about the Sasquatch in South Florida, particularly, from anywhere else? What are the main differences you think, in your estimation?
In our research in other places, first of all, what we've identified is the exact same species. Individuals from our research areas here in South Florida look exactly the same in Maine. It's the same this is the same species, and we find the similarities are striking between individuals. So I'd have to say that the similarities statewide is one thing that is it really blew my mind. As far as what's different, it's an eco region that essentially is tropical, right? Like the tropics began at Lake Worth, Florida. So what we're researching in a tropical environment, and so behaviorally there are some major differences, and where you'll find them, there are some major differences in that the development down here, because Florida is largely in South Florida in particular, at 0 feet sea level or beneath 0 feet. So under 0 feet, like in the Everglades, you're getting, 3 feet below sea level, some places, even a little more than that in some places. But so what it is there's a shortage of dry land down here. And engaging with the subject on a professional level, meaning I'm putting 50, 70, 100 hours a week into this and spending as much time as I have in these environments. One of the things that we found and that, has become very clear is that the Sasquatch were always here. And what happened was we came in and bulldozed it and made roads and cut the forest down where they were living in these niche environments, and we took them. We took the best environments and we developed them, and they were pushed further into the interior of the state. So Florida's got that, everybody loves the waterfront thing down here.
Right.
Well, at one point during the development, the boom in the 70s, the Sasquatch obviously loved it because they were objecting everywhere. Construction companies, employees reporting sightings. All through the history of the state of Florida, the Sasquatch is present. Interactions with modern humans present, going all the way back. Archaeologists have us dated at about 12,000 years. They call them the archaic ones. 6,000 years of human occupation in Palm Beach County, according to archaeology, right? So for the last 6,000 years, they're talking about Native Americans in that particular area. I would say that that's probably the biggest difference. Not that doesn't exist, the proximity of wilderness areas to development, because everywhere there's a city, there's some of that somewhere. Curiously, if you go and you look, you're going to see there's sightings in those areas. That there's that gray area where it's civilized and it's not. And in those gray areas, you find people hunting, you find people recreating at campgrounds, hiking, and this is where the sightings occur. So if anything, I think what we have that's different than the rest of the country is that our development is actually overlapping into these wilderness areas. And the sightings are sometimes in people's backyards. And this is countrywide. We talked about that today. Mm-hmm. The frequency of this, that's what's going on down here, is increasing. And so I'd say the one thing that's different is there's not a lot of dry land to work in. And on both sides of it, you got development on the east side. On the west side, you got agriculture, and they're pinched in between. And those are some pretty thin strips of forest corridor, or jungle corridor would be a better way to describe it. But so I think that the fact that they basically are trapped is the one significant thing that's given us the advantage, really realizing that was the case, studying the maps, becoming familiar with cartography, man. Every aspect of how I can make my job easier, which is finding these creatures. In 2015, Melanie and I probably hiked the length of the state of Florida twice in 1 year. We were doing 14 miles every single time we went out. And when we eventually started to find these areas, that's when we didn't have to do that anymore. It became, drive closer, and then you don't have to hike as far. And, and learn, and you start, getting into that stuff. You start seeing a lot of the involvement that wildlife management has with the areas that these guys occupy. So I think those are the big differences, is that wildlife management practices down here are very obviously have something to do with this. And the fact that they can't go anywhere, I think they're watching them closely, So those I haven't seen that anywhere else. Like in Maine, I didn't even see a police officer. I was there for a week, and I didn't see a wildlife officer. I didn't even see a police officer. It was like a completely different country. It was like Florida was in the 70s and early 80s, where everybody was still kind of running around and everything was loose as far as laws and restrictions go.
Nobody wants to go to Maine.
I really enjoyed that place, man. It was beautiful. But yeah, so we have a lot of Sasquatch down here, and those are the biggest differences. I think they can't get away from you very far. Because if they go too far, they're going to hit some agriculture, and if they come too far east, they're going to hit residential. So
that was a major factor in deciding, where we were going to do this expedition, this 7-part docuseries we're going to be shooting on actual research, and you're actually going to be helping me head that up, which I'm grateful and extremely excited about. I think the whole team is actually excited about that. But what I see as far as Florida is concerned, and what's a benefit on both sides, is the fact that Okeechobee is there and where it is. I think, to me, that's major. I think if you went 20 miles out from Okeechobee all the way around, you're going to have a pretty good chance of seeing one of these creatures if you're out there amongst them. It's just what I saw anyway. You're talking about, topography. I think Okeechobee is extremely important to them as far as location and them staying. But you're right. They're close. They're close quarter. They're in there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I was out on the lake yesterday, and it's doing real well. It looked beautiful. Yesterday was my birthday, and my brother took me out fishing on the lake, and we had a great day. But we were just amazed at the habitat that surrounds that lake, man. It's prime habitat, like you said, and there are places on the west side of the lake that make the East Coast and the habitat that we research in pale in comparison to the stuff that's on the west side of that lake. There's places over there that I'm just dying to get into. Eventually we're going to get there. So.
Yeah, like I told you, Brooksville. That picture from Brooksville that I showed you, that place. Yeah. That was actually our backup. If we weren't going to be able to go to the area that we're going to be going to, that Brooksville's, because it's small town, not going to get messed with a whole lot. And as far as happy birthday, by the way, that's the big 50, isn't it?
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Fortunately.
Yeah. You don't look it, man. You look good.
Thank
you. You've done, my goodness, you're coming up on 500-600 expeditions at least. I know you have to be in these areas, and as familiar as you are with them. Tell us about some of your closer encounters. I know you've had quite a few sightings. I know you've actually gotten to the point where you're seeing them a lot more often now.
Yeah.
So I know. Let me tell them about one that we had, and you and I talked about this today. This was the second time I ever went in this place with you, and we're walking in, and it's about 1,000 yards from the road. We're walking in, just nonchalant, going to some certain area, and I think we were going to get, a good game plan of what we were going to do for the day. And all of a sudden, we hear behind us, we're walking on this levee, and we hear behind us into the water, like fast running footsteps. And then just crash into the water. But we just walked by the thing. He let us walk by him and then scared the devil out, because I know you turned around and you said I was in the air. I probably was whenever that happened.
So it scared both of us big time.
But
I actually have the film, and you look shook up.
I bet.
I gotta shoot right now. And you're like shaking and stuttering, and I was like, yeah, well, it's frightening, It's
to be fair, I probably looked shook up before that anyway. going in this place. Mark will tell you, there was a lot of trepidation on my part to even go. It was let me just come down here and do it, Kerry, the type of situation. So somehow I did it. But I mean, that's, to me, and we talked about this too, that is just it's like they're telling you, straight up, I was right there and you missed me, sucker.
That's right. That's right.
He could have stayed right there. We'd never known a thing. Why let us know, by doing that and running and jumping into the water like that? I mean, and there's almost no doubt, what it is. And I think was the second time. No, that was the second day. The third time we had gone in, we made it all the way down to where we were going to stop and talk about things. And I'm in front of you walking, and you can hear across the way, talking. And I know I had to be stunned. I turned around and looked at you because I'd heard that before, that voice, that talking. I mean, and we're completely and totally unprepared for it. Of course, I was. But I mean, those are the things that are going to happen if you're going, you're actually paying attention in these areas. That stuff's happening all around this place. So tell us about some of your more interesting encounters that you've had in there.
Well, you actually came after the most epic game of cat and mouse had been underway for about 3 years at that point. So in that situation, they had been doing stuff like that where they're running and jumping in the water, and it sounds like a car. Whoa, hits the water. Yeah. And you're just jumping out of your skin. And Melanie's first sighting was one that was actually sitting on the bank, and we were leaving. We just shut the cameras off. We had 50 more feet to go, and we were going to be out. And he was sitting on the bank, and there was a hole where I don't know if they had broken the branches or whatever, but all the way down to the canal, which is about 20 feet, down the bank from the top of the levee. He was sitting there, and I didn't see him. I was paying attention to, like, I'm finally leaving, right? Because you know how it is in there. You spend 4 hours in there, and it's like you need to go. It's like you can't stand it. The bugs, the heat, the humidity, the whole thing. And so we just shut our cameras off. Mel was behind me, and I passed the hole on an angle, and she was directly in front of it. And what she saw, I heard him move from the bank to go into the water, but she saw him go forward. He basically was sitting there, and the edge of the canal doesn't slope and go down slowly into the water. It's a drop of about 3 feet, And so he was sitting there, and he dove forward. She got a good look at his whole back and partial of the apex because he had his head moving forward. He only kind of caught the dive, but the whole back, And Melanie, you know how small she is. She's like putting her hands way out there, And I was like, wow, So they were doing stuff like that for months, And I think what it is they're not used to people becoming aware that they're there doing what they're doing, and they had been getting away with it for a long time, obviously. So as far as experiences go, when we first went in the area, I was with my brother, and we were fishing, and it just looked like a perfect spot. Had a lot of shade, and there were canopies, and the whole area looked like it was, going to be a really good spot to fish. And we were leapfrogging around each other, going down this canal bank, go up to the top, walk down a levee, go around my brother, and go down to the water. Then he would walk up, go down past me, and go down to the water. Well, we did that for about an hour, and then he hit a spot where he went around me and went down the canal bank, and there was an 18-inch track. It was in this moss right on the bank coming out of the water. And so he was trying to get my attention. I hear him like 30 yards down making the sounds and all this. So I go up to the bank or to the top of the levee, and I walk down. And as I'm walking by him, I'm looking and I'm thinking, what's he doing? And he's like, get down here, get down here. So I went down there, and he's like, is this what I think it is? And I was like, oh, God. And it was like, if you've ever found a giant track, it's one of those moments where you're like swallowing, man. And and it's something that has a profound effect on you because you realize right then, like, this is like happening. You know what I mean? This is like, there's a giant, this is Sasquatch. There's nothing else this could have been. I mean, it was the biggest track I'd ever seen, man, And so, and not only that, but there was still water in it. Like, it was still wet. And we were only there an hour and a half after sunrise. So that was that. It was from that morning was my estimation and with my tracking experience. So at that point, I had very little understanding of what I was dealing with. But I knew I was going to get back in there and look into it right there, because my thing is there's not it's not a situation where they can go migrate 100 miles and get out of there. This is the only wilderness area in this particular spot. It's like,
right.
There's homes around this and agriculture and major highways and, preserves and all this stuff. So that's where it all started. Um, I've had many experiences in that place.
Was that your first encounter? What first got you into it? What happened that started it all?
Well, I'm like everybody else, that I always hear the same thing. Oh, In Search Of, in the 1980s, and Leonard Nimoy, and all that stuff fascinated me. You know what I mean? But I was an outdoorsman, and I've been fishing down here since I was, really young, and I'd been out in these areas, and I just didn't think it was possible. And even when you're young, it's like a question of, I don't want to believe something like that is out there. You know what I mean? Because it just freaks you out. I'm looking at Patty, I'm thinking, I don't ever want to see something like that. I hope it's not real, but there's that built-in fear, I think, and I took my first encounter from my best friend and his mother at 15. They were telling the truth. This is a deeply religious woman, with a no-nonsense type of woman. This woman used to catch us in every lie, trying to get over on her, anything like that. This woman I had a lot of respect for, and she was the one that initially convinced me that they were real. But I just was more focused on, like Kerry. His thing was hunting for a long time, 30 years. I was focused on fishing. It was my thing. It became my livelihood for a long time. And I loved it. I didn't pay attention to anything like that. I'd never seen anything by way of tracks or anything like that. But then again, I was always in areas that were easier to get to on foot, or I was in a boat, and a lot of times you're not in the forest. So it wasn't until that day when my brother and I started to hike into these areas that you can't take a boat and you can't easily get to hiking, right? That's when I really started finding evidence. But one day I decided to get off the couch, get off the computer about 8 years ago, and actually go take a look. And first thing I did was I went to a preserve and walked in the front door, and there was a ranger at the desk. And I said, "Can I talk to you about something?" And she was like, "Sure." And I said, "I want to talk to you about a Bigfoot sighting that occurred in here." And she's like, looking at me, give me the look. And she's like, "Really, man?" And I'm like, "Yeah, really. It actually has 2 park rangers involved in it. And I'd like to know the names of these 2 people." And I laid the whole situation out for her. And she was like, "I would have no idea how I could find out who that was, if that even occurred." And I'm like, man, well, right about then, an FWC officer walked in, and he started asking me all these questions, and was like really interested in why I wanted to know about this. And right then I was like, picking up on the fact that, why is he being like this? You know what I mean? Like, why is this person? I felt like I was on trial, And then he said, "Well, if you're going to be in here doing this, you need to pull permits." And I was like, I'm just John Q. taxpayer money. You know what I mean? I'm just in here looking around, not like working for an organization or anything like that. And I'm not going to pull any permits, and I'm just going to do what I usually do, which is shoot footage. You know what I mean? And so he was like, "Well, he said something else. I can't remember. It was a while ago, but the nature of the conversation felt like I was being harassed." Well, I left there, and I went up the road a little ways, and I was driving down the road, and also there are fences that run down this highway. And in the 90s, I worked for the fence company that actually built those fences. And we were told, after we put about a mile of barbed wire on top of these things that border this, they were actually creating the preserve. At the time, it was a water catchment area, and they just set it aside as a preserve, and they were fencing it in. We were doing it. We got the contract. We put the barbed wire already up on like a mile of it. And the county guy came out and said, "You need to turn all that barbed wire around so it's facing in." And we were all like, "Why would we do something like that?" And he's like, "Just turn it around. It has to be facing in." So we were like, thought it was weird. There were some jokes, skunk ape, this and that, But I was driving down that road, and I was looking at the fence, and there was about a 700-pound palm tree in the middle of a prairie where there was no palm trees that had been drug over and thrown on the fence. And the fence was down. And I was like, whoa. So I did a U-turn, and I pulled over, and I got out, and I went and looked. And you could see where it was drug through the prairie. And there was a huge drag mark and punch holes. There were no machinery tracks, no tire tracks, none of that stuff. And the nearest tree line where there were any trees in this particular spot was about 100, 125 yards away. And I looked, and the whole top of it was worn down. And I thought, man, could this actually be happening? You know what I mean? And so I was interested in going in and getting back to that palm tree, because I wanted to check to see if it indeed came through from that tree line, and if there were tracks, and how big were they? How did this thing get there? So I went around and I found this place where I could pull over. I pulled over. I got my fishing pole, because that was my cover. Right? I was just fishing this canal. And so I'm walking down this canal, and I got down a couple hundred yards, and I was fishing, and I looked down, and I noticed that there was a huge rock that probably weighed 100 pounds. And the rock is still there to this day. And there was mussels and apple snails all smashed on the rock. None of the meat was there, and it was still wet. So I said to myself from this morning, it must be an otter. And I looked around, and then I saw that there was a rock that was about this big, way out of the size of what an otter would use to smash these things, because otters will use a rock and smash them on their chest, or they'll use it on another rock, and they'll do it. It's a little rock usually. It's not going to be 5 to 7 pounds, And it had the snail and mussel residue on the shell. Now I was looking, and I started to look, and I found where weeds were ripped out of the canal and thrown on land. Somebody was pulling stuff out of the canal, not in the canal, pulling stuff to the edge of the canal, but and then I looked, and there was a huge punch hole that looked like about an 18-inch track. And so I looked up the bank, and the weeds were strewn, and there was a gouge at the top where it looked like someone had gone through there, and it was a very wide track. It wasn't toes discernible or anything like that, but I followed it up the bank, followed it across the levee, and there was the perimeter fence for the preserve, and it was pulled down to the ground. And the poles, which it's not a huge fence. It's about a 4-foot tall fence with four wire runs, and they're little wood posts, probably 10-inch diameter posts. And they were bent all the way in, and the barbed wire was to the ground. I was like thinking, this is ridiculous, but I'm going to look anyway. And I stepped over the fence, and immediately on my left-hand side, I saw a track that was enormous, and it was in fresh grass, tall grass. And I was like, man. So I went over there, and I documented it with my phone. I still have that shot to this day. I filmed it, and then I looked up, and in front of me, about 20 feet away, was this wall of really thick jungle, and there was a hole in it that was about 60 inches wide, shaped like an arch, and the branches were all broken, and it just looked like a doorway to go into this impenetrable wall of bush. And I was like, I just couldn't believe that I was like, this has got to be homeless people. You know what I mean? And it didn't make sense to me that they'd be eating lost plants out of the canal, but I thought people can do things, man, when they're desperate. You know what I mean? So I'm like trying to keep my wits about me about this. And so anyway, I went in, and this thing was orchestrated. It went back a good 35 feet, something like that. It went around, and it had a corner to it, and it was like a tunnel, but it was all perfectly laid out, and it was big. It was probably 7.5, 8 feet, and the branches were broke. There were even branches pinned and stuff woven around them. Anyway, long story short, I got back in there, and I was standing there, and there was a bunch of mud around this tree, and I identified a very big track on the other side of it. And on the left side of the tree, there was a big wall of bushes and another big tree about 20 feet ahead of that. And I don't know why I did this, but I went "Roar!" at the top of my lungs. And I did it 3 times. I did it 3 times as loud as I could. And in between the second and the third one, I heard, oh, like a guy, but big, right? And it was real deep, but it was human. And I froze, and I wasn't thinking about anything except I'm going to get my ass kicked right now. You know what I mean? Because I felt like maybe this is this homeless guy, and he's obviously big, and now I'm gonna just go. Well, right about then he stood up. Whatever it was, I heard it clear as day. Dude stood up, sounded like he turned, the bushes rustled, and he mocked me perfectly. The same exact 3 yells that I did, but at the end of each one, he was sarcastic. He went, "Oh," like he was mocking me. And then he turned around and you could hear it, and he smashed off into the brush. But at first I thought he was going to get me because the brush was the amount of movement sounded like a football team. And so I turned and ran and immediately tripped and fell. My phone went flying. I got up. I was tangled up in all these vines. I was screaming, oh God, trying to get out of there. You know what I mean? And so I made it out of there, and I ran all the way back to the car, and I hood slid. I did a TJ hooker across the hood, and I was on the other side, and I looked up, and right then a semi went by behind me, scared the crap out of me, man. And I was like, man. And so I sat there, and I was thinking to myself, man, is this really happening? Am I awake? Did this just happen? Because there was no getting around it. I'd never heard anything that sounded like that. As human as it sounded, it didn't sound like a man. It sounded like a giant, but it sounded man-like is the way I put it. Just giant vocal cords, right? And it was so loud. When it hit me, it was like going through me, and I couldn't understand that. Now I know what it is. It's the lower end frequencies, right? But I was in shock. I think it took maybe about 5 minutes, and then I got mad because I just was in there asking them about this. Mm-hmm. This all happened within an hour of the time that I was being hassled by the FWC guy. So I right then, I knew unequivocally that this was real. And in spite of the people I've talked to and the eyewitnesses and all this stuff, now I knew. And so right then I made up my mind that I was going to do something about it. And if they were lying, then I was going to make them all understand that that's not right. And that's when it all started.
Wow. And now it's going to, hopefully, the expedition be even more, you know, have even more of a chance to prove that.
Well, you know, I don't think we're going to prove anything. And I'm hoping we can get something definitive. I don't think we're going to be able to get anything more than what Mark already has. Yeah. But what I think we're going to be able to do is have that number of people in there telling the story as we go. And, you know, I talked to Mark about this, you know, when you first started doing these videos and shows, they had a narrative to them. You know, it was more, and I know you've gotten more into the actual data. And I know you guys are trying to prove this. And I mean, I hope you're absolutely 100% successful. The amount of physical evidence that you have probably just in your freezer alone should be enough. But yeah, you would think the whole hair, when you guys put the movie out, the one with Dr. Lester in it, and you did the hair sample, where did you get that, and what gave you the idea to microscope it like that and put the light on it? Was it just a hunch you had, or? Well,
I along the way I had seen some things that didn't make sense to me. You've got these faces here in the in your YouTube, you know, in the background here on the screen here, right? I was seeing these, you know what I mean? I've seen individuals with my own two eyes on multiple occasions that look exactly like the ones you have up here in your background. Just like the guy behind me is over here. Yeah. I've seen them. They look more primate. But when I initially started to have these encounters, there were a few times that what I saw, as primate as it looked, it didn't make sense what I was staring at. And so, you know, like everybody else, my mind runs to, you know, the ridiculous, you know, it's like, you know, okay, settle down, Mark. You know what I mean? Like,
you can say it. You can say the woo. You can say that. We agree with you.
I was saying they're not aliens. They're not aliens. Everything's fine, right? This is not what it is. Let's try to rationally understand this, right? And so what it is I was one day, the first time we'd been researching about 6 months in the area, I think somewhere around there. And Melanie was on my right-hand side, and I heard the bushes, and we both, you know, looked over, and I said, start shooting. So we're shooting, and And to the left of that, where the movement was, I was staring at what I couldn't understand what I was seeing. It looked like a face, and it looked like an apex on top of it. It appeared to be gray all over, but the face had multiple colors flashing all over it. And I noticed where it was, and it didn't sink in what was going on at that point, but what it was, and that's when we started to realize they don't use chemicals, right, to bathe. So their skin is very oily. And so that was the initial theory, right? I'm seeing this, and I couldn't understand. It was direct sunlight. Then there was some canopy and there was some bush, and it turned green, and then it looked chrome, and then it was kind of white, and then it was like pinkish, and it was moving. It looked like the face was alive with color. And then I looked at Millie. I said, "Are you seeing this?" And when I looked back real quick, it was gone. The bushes were moving, you know. And so I went, man, there's something going on here that I don't understand, and I want to understand this because I think this is going to help us to document them better. So initially, common sense, they don't bathe with chemicals, so they've got to have oily skin, you know. This is what I was thinking. I think I may have even told you this at this time. I was like, this is what's going on here. What I didn't understand was what I was staring at was achromatically colored. That's the color spectrum from black all the way to white, and all the shades of gray in between, from light grays, from white to the light grays, all the way through to the dark grays, all the way to black. Primates, many primates, human primates or the lesser human primates or non-human primates, many of them are achromatically colored. So this is not something that is outside the norm, right, for any kind of a primate. But what I didn't know was that light diffusion will interact with this color spectrum in ways that has been thoroughly documented by science, by the way. And I was unaware of all this. So when I started to put all that stuff together, I needed to prove my theories that this is what was going on. So in order to do that, I had to catch them in these situations. That was when I started paying real close attention to the symmetry, because the way I initially began to catch these guys on film was the recognition of the symmetry of their faces, the bone structure of their faces. While the soft tissue has a great deal of variation between individuals, the bone structures are very similar between the males, and then it's a little bit different for the females, but most of the females have the same type of bone structure. It's a little more feminine is the way I would put it. It's not as chiseled. It's not as scary. That's a better way.
A lot softer features.
Softer features. Perfect. Right. And, but then I started, and you don't want to know how many green colored subjects I was throwing away. I was throwing away quality footage in the garbage and on the floor in the editing room, and entire clips, thinking Bigfoot aren't green. And it turns out, well, they're not, obviously, most of the time, right? But in the end, it's a trick of light. It's called achromatic aberration or achromatic distortion. And it's the diffused forest canopy light hitting those plants, diffusing off of it, picking up a little bit of that green, hitting that achromatic skin, and it will turn lime. The darker the individual that the diffused canopy light hits, the darker the green, the shade of green is the general rule. It varies. And I have hundreds of shots of anywhere from 15 to 20 different individuals with this phenomenon going on at the time. And so once we were repetitively able to document that, you know, I started, and all the while I was consulting with Dr. Lester, you know, because we consult with academics on a regular basis. I mean, at that time, it was, you know, we were really using the academics that are actually helping to fund our work. Most of, you know, there's a lot of members on our site that are academics that, you know, are participating and trying to get this done and helping us to do it. So we would consult with these people, and they said, well, look, man, if you've got repetitive documentation of this, and I can see what it is, I'm staring at it. It's archaic human primate bone structure. There's no way around it. Bushes don't do that. Then you stay with what you've got as a conclusion until someone proves you wrong. And so that's when we ran with it. And so far, in you know, about 3.5 years of that and documenting that, we've not been proven wrong. What we've seen is more corroboration that this is indeed the case. that achromatic color, regardless of the animal, is subject to this aberration phenomenon when they're in the right light conditions and in the right environments.
What you're talking about, people can do for themselves and see for themselves at home. Go to Home Depot and get a gray paint chip. Like on the card, get a gray one, get a little gloss on it, put it up next to any color you want, shine a light on it, and it's going to turn that color. Happens every single time. I did it myself. So after you suggested I do that, I said, okay, let me go try this. So yeah, we had some here and I got it, and it's absolutely true. And I thought about making like a video about it, but you already got all this stuff. But that, to me, man, when you did the hair and you put that hair under the microscope, and it was just, so it's not just the skin, it's their hair.
That was huge, man. And it was a relief for me that we were able to begin to document repetitively this achromatic aberration thing. When I started to realize I'm staring at a Sasquatch, there's no way around it. It just happens to be lime green. And here's the interesting part. All along, I'm learning how to identify these things in real time. That's the key, right? The key to shooting better footage is being able to identify that there is a subject there to begin with, right? Because then you can start to operate your equipment properly and the zooming and all that. There's a lot of stuff going on through this whole process that was really just, for me, it was like, man, because at first I thought, am I actually dealing with Bigfoot here? Because this is the strangest thing I've ever seen, right? So it was a relief to me because I'd seen a Sasquatch in 2013. You're familiar with my encounter. Most people are if they've been around. But the face had those colors on it, and I couldn't explain it. So I had seen that in action, but I had no idea what was going on. So throughout this process, we've been looking for the physical evidence. The hair samples was something that we've been looking for. And in Central Florida, we managed to get it. And it was a member first, right? We had our first members camp out, and only one person came. And she had us all to herself. And we went on all these expeditions. And on the final morning, we had some incidents. But on the final morning, she found what looked like a blind. It was a structure of some type. And in it was a couple hairs. And I was like, well, let's bag that. And so I took it home, and I was working on trying to find somebody who could test the sample, right? When we had our next members camp out, and we had a bunch of people there. And thankfully, two of our members took it upon themselves to go way out behind the campground, and they were scouting an area. Now, the night before, we had action behind the campsite, and there were 5 witnesses to everything that was happening. We all had cameras rolling. It was absolutely incredible. And so they went to look in the area, and they just kept going, kind of. They found something about maybe 400 yards behind the campsite, 350, 400 yards. And there were hairs caught in the oak trees. So immediately they came back, got me and Melanie. We all went out there. We shot the scene, collected the hairs, and they were everywhere. And I mean, hair like I'd never seen, man. Just in looking at it, it's not something that you find in the wilderness, right? It looked human, but a lot thicker. And it definitely, I had some samples that were 22 inches long, over hairs and under hairs, smaller diameters, larger diameters. They appeared to be from either the same individual or the same 2 individuals. Black in coloration by the eye, but I was curious about that. And so when we got back to the house, I started to look for people to test. And once again, no one wanted to test them. No one. I had contacted, I think, three universities and 2 different organizations that have to do with wildlife conservation to talk with their forensic scientists and their forensic hair analysis specialists. And these people were unwilling to even look at the samples. And I was like, look, I'm going to send you something that I don't think you've ever seen. I mean, what would have a 22-inch long hair in Central Florida where you're not allowed to have equestrians? You know what I mean? There's no horses walking around back here. I mean, it's a jungle back there. You know what I mean? So, and they just, well, I don't know what to tell you. So we've got to run around. So I said, well, I'll do this myself then. And that's what happened. I went looking and I was looking for something affordable, and I found that micro cam, and I was in a state of shock, man. The first time I put a sample under that thing and I was looking at it, I'm like, well, if you look at it from here, it looks black, but when you put it under the microscope, it looks green. And I was like, man, and then there were oil deposits and follicles, and they were tapered, no cuts, none of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were snapped, and they had an interesting core. The oil deposits were ridiculous on these hair samples. It looked like whatever this was, it never bathed in its entire life. The diameter was 3 to 5 times the diameter of most human hair that I put next to it. 5 times the diameter of my wife's hair. Ridiculous. And then I started, well, how does the achromatic thing play into this if this is a Sasquatch hair? I don't know that it is, right? But let me see what happens and try to simulate moving light. And so I took some LEDs and I started to hit it from angles, and that's when the magic started happening. The hair comes to life. It appears to be moving. The surface of it just comes to life, and it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it is. And you know, when you look at that and you start putting these things together, it's not hard to understand why we can't find them. Or why we, you know, the layperson or the normal person that even is aware to go out and look for them. It's so hard. I mean, obviously we'd have a whole lot better evidence like you have across the board, and we just don't have it. And I know it took, we talked about this today too, and I'm not trying to disparage any researcher out there, but you find, and I think it's the difference is having that encounter, seeing one, and therein lies, you have the knowledge. You don't have the luxury to believe anything anymore. You know. So when you know, there are these answers. The answers are there. A lot of speculation gets to get thrown away because you know that there are these answers there. And I think that provides that drive. You've got those, you know, you and I, we've had those moments of introspection, you know, those, you know, deep look at ourselves moments in the field together. You know, we've had them. Yeah. But that's the difference is you're there, you stay in the field. And I think a lot of people run into when they do research is they go out and they're not seeing anything, they're not experiencing anything. So they just they'll go back, but they turn around and leave. That's not what you do. Like, how many times have you gone out there and just seen and experienced nothing? You know,
I can't even tell you how many times. Most of the time, in the beginning, especially. You know, we had several incidents where I got hit with a branch because I was overly aggressive in the dark, and you know, I was trying to make sure it wasn't homeless people. So I was, you know, hey, you know, and I was going at the bushes, and I was, you know, popped with a branch across my chest, bruised my chest, knocked me on my ass, knocked the camera out of my hand. I got back up and I started shooting again, and there was moving off on 2 legs through these bushes. We knew what we had going on. At that point, I had already seen one in 2013. Yeah, it was about 17 miles from where this other spot was that I'm referring to now. But the track that my brother had found, now we have this. We'd found a structure. I was eliminating possibilities as we went along. Boy Scouts. Was it this? Was it that? I researched all of this stuff, and none of it seemed to come from anything that was noted anywhere. So, you know, it was like, I think, you know, you talk about introspection and really, and looking at all of this, it's like, you know, I was thinking of, you know, I'm going to do this, you know, and then you see one and you're like, I don't want to do this. You know what I mean? I don't want to do this, you know, but there's always been, and looking inside, there's always been this, this nagging moral obligation. I don't know how else to put it. I feel like what I saw was far more important than any tag or tagline or one-off that anyone's ever said about this subject. And it deserved the attention and respect of what I saw and what it represented, right? Because what I saw and what it represented is something that is life-changing and life-alternating. I mean, it's a 180 in perspective. And it changed my consciousness. And really, the way I think about the outdoors, like you had that same kind of, you know, shift, you know, it's a core shift where you're mean, Kerry, one of the first things you told me was that you didn't want to go back to the woods anymore. It's been 10 years. And I was like, man. Then you told me about your rifles and all the stuff that you went through. And I was like, yeah, you know, that almost happened to me. I was this close after I saw that. But then the moral obligation thing is the only way I can say it. The consciousness of the people of this country, and I'm not just, you know, it's not just this country, it's everywhere. If this was to be shown, if they were to be able to experience or see in a serious light, unequivocally, what I saw or what you saw, they would have the exact same opinion that we have, that this is important. And so in looking at how the subject's been treated, I don't know, I just felt an obligation. So, you know, I had to look at myself and say, okay, well, this is what I'm willing to do about it, right? And for one reason or another, I picked it all up and I went back in. You know what I mean? I acquired more technology and I went back in. You know, I eased in at first. Mel will tell you I wouldn't go back to where I saw him. The first thing I did was take her in and let her, like, you know, it was like a couple miles from where I was like, this is where I saw him, but we're not going over there. We're going to go over here. And she was looking at me, you know, and I'm like, it's real. I'm telling you. Right. And in that day, she found an 18-inch track regardless. And I wanted to leave when I saw that. But it started to open my eyes, one expedition at a time. And then, you know, really looking at myself, why did I get hit with that branch? Why were they aggressive? I was. And the fact that they chose to walk off and not rip my arms off and beat me to death with them told me a lot about the emotional intelligence that I had just interacted with. And in point of fact, it was more mature than I was. And it was startling that was the case. And it taught me a lot about myself, you know, not that it took immediately, but you know, looking at the situation, that's what it is with me. Like, you know, I say, you know, I'm not going to quit no matter what. No matter what, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to see this through. And so regardless of what happens and how many times I say, I want to quit, I hate this, I can't stand it anymore. It's hot. It's like, you know, I've been just the poison ivy. In 2016, I had poison ivy for 7 months. I've had broken ribs 4 times. I've thrown my back out every single year since we've been researching and spent over 4 months in bed trying to recover from it, a month at a time in each incident. You know, we're constantly under attack from, you know, the community of people that have difficulty with actual reality. There's always that pleasant aspect of what we deal with, trying to bring the truth, you know. It's no matter what. And so there's always that. And I could throw tantrums and whatever it is. But in the end, when I'm laying in bed, the same thing goes through my head. I ain't going to quit. I'm going to see this through. That's what fuels me. You know what I mean? So,
well, and that's a difference in you and a lot of people that, you know, even if they have had a sighting, their attitude toward it is, I know exactly what you're talking about. Whether you call it a moral obligation or not, you want people to know. You're not so worried about the Sasquatch. They can take care of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, you hear that a lot. Well, we need to protect them. I don't think we need to protect them. I think they're going to be just fine, even if they are validated that, you know,
yeah,
they're not going anywhere. But you want people to know, and you figure out, you look at yourself. What's the best way that I can let people know this? I can't go out there and do the research. This is for me personally. I can't go out there and do the research. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be around them. What can we do? So we just started telling other people's story, but we not just the encounter. We want the whole Odyssey. That's why it's called Bigfoot Odyssey. From the beginning to the end, from non-believer or indifferent to eyeballs deep and everything that happened in between. And in doing that, I think, to me, you know, in our part in this, you do your part because you have the ability and the knowledge and know-how and the wherewithal to do it the way you do it. I don't have that. What I have is something different. I'm not a good Bigfoot researcher. I don't think I would be. I can tell a story, though. We talked about that today too. So I think people finding their niche and their own part in this and how and coming together, you know, doing this stuff together, and not doubt is one thing. People are going to doubt, but when you have the kind of evidence and you really take an objective look at what's actually there and what you have, you can't really deny it. You shouldn't be able to anyway. The normal, average, everyday person that looks at it can say, wow, there is really something to this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It's to me, it's important. We have we know this. We've been going an hour. We're just getting started. We got a pretty good crowd in here, 282 in the live. That's not too shabby for a Wednesday. Well, that's not too shabby for us for any day. Mark, you must be a pretty.
Whatever you want to do, man. I got nothing but time.
Well, yeah. Well, there's so much we haven't gotten into so far. I mean, you've met with quite a bit of resistance, not just from the Bigfoot community, but just in the places that you're going. I remember you talking about. I'll tell you what. Let's talk about the whole energy situation, because you've got the only video that I know of where you actually have video evidence of being affected by some type of energy.
Yeah.
And that one night, talk to us about, tell us what happened that night and what you think that is.
Okay. It was a week before Halloween, 2016. And Melanie and I had conducted 2 night expeditions up to that point. And both times we regretted it. There was so much stuff going on in the bushes around us, the chattering, the just, we didn't like it. And so our justification for our work and the way when we shot was cameras work better in the day. And that's good enough for all of us, right? You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to do the finding Bigfoot thing where there's nothing. Cameras work better in the day. We don't need to be out there. It's fine, And so when right, And so why would you want to be in there in a situation where they have the upper hand? I don't see well in the daytime, let alone at night, right? So I'm like, well, let's do this anyway. And she was like, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, she's like, we don't have to. We're doing fine. And I'm like, I know, but it would be interesting to see if something's going on still. And we're further along now, and we can handle it. Whatever you got to say to get her to go.
Right.
And so anyway, we went and we approached the area. I had my Canon with the IR screen, the green screen, and I was shooting. Melanie was actually in front of me with the iPad, and I had a spotlight with me. We approached the area and we stopped at a place we call the Crossroads, at which point we heard the bushes on the opposite side of the trail on both sides. The Crossroads is 2 trails that intersect. So you get 4 corners of bush. And then the trail runs through it, both directions. On the opposite side, on both sides of that trail, was massive movement. And we had just got there. And I was like, oh, God, it was already starting, right? And right then, an individual took off on 2 legs, huge, in mud that was still wet, loud as plain as day, huge guy running off. And as he went, I heard him hit something, which turned out to be the tree. I think what he did was he ran by and just knocked the tree down with one of his arms, because the run never slowed and never stopped. And the tree went down, and it was a good 60-footer. At that point, I was like, I looked over at Melanie, and I was like, so I started to go into the area to get a better look, because it was, all this going on. And I was thinking, I'm probably going to die now. And I went forward. And as I got closer to the corner where all those bushes were, my camera started fizzling, and the screen on the side, it comes out, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, whoa. And then I started to feel a slight tickle in my chest, in my belly and my chest. The hair on my chest and on my forearm started to get that feeling like it was standing up, and my blood ran cold. And in about maybe 2 seconds after that, my heart was palpitating, and the screen was, I couldn't hear anything. It was just going crazy, the screen like this, but there were no, I could hear the individual running, but there was no electrical sound, no popping or anything like that. That was what was freaking me out. It went on for a good wave of about 10 seconds, and then it intensified and it started to ease off a little bit, and then it came on twice as strong again. And when it came on the second time, I literally went down on one knee, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Melanie came rushing over. Oh my God. And I was like, I'm having a heart attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. I felt like I'd never been tased, but I've been shocked, you know, doing electrical work and that kind of stuff. And it was similar to that. I would say that what I felt was some kind of a vibration that appeared to have an electrical signal too. It was strange. But just like that, it was like a switch, click, and it was done. The camera went back to normal in 1 second. It was normal. And then my breathing started, because I was hyperventilating, man. I mean, it was like, I thought I was going to die. If I was having anxiety, it wasn't about what was going on aside from what I was experiencing, because there was stuff going on that was, I mean, she was freaking out about all that because she wasn't experiencing it. And as she ran over towards me, it stopped. So she didn't get any of it. The camera's got it though. And I got it.
You can see all this in the video. It's like I said, it's the only one I've ever seen or heard of that's actually documented some kind of electrical effect on you and your equipment at the same time. I mean, it's almost epic. We were talking about the movie. Where can people find the crypto reality movies, and what are they called?
It's on our members funding site. It's members only. It's a monthly contribution to the study, and you get access to all of our films. It's cryptoreality.us. It's really easy. We do require a PayPal account so that they can process everything. It runs through their secured servers, so you're protected through PayPal. And all of our films are on there. The electrical film is on there as well. I think it's episode 3 of the Bigfoot Researchers Journal is the exact episode that it's in. But I will absolutely
worth it for anybody, because we're gonna. When I tell people, you know, if you want to see Bigfoot, you want to see actual evidence of these creatures, go watch Mark ZASKEY'S stuff, and then you take your stuff off YouTube. I want to be able to tell. I want to be able to tell people where they can go, and it's cryptoreality.us. It's so well worth it. Go look at it. Go watch all of it, all that stuff. You will
appreciate that for sure. And you know something, we do everything we can to work as hard as we can and have never let up. And there's not a person that has been a member for as long as we've had the site that won't tell you the same thing. It's evidenced in the work that we put out, and we take it real serious. So all of it goes directly to funding and continuing so that we can continue to do this. So just so you know, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, we know it's not some kind of money grab. You don't have anything, but everybody needs to see this, and it's like you said, there has to be a way. We're leaning that way ourselves, about putting the documentaries that we shoot behind a paywall, and you hate to have to do that. If YouTube would do right, then we wouldn't have to do these things. But to keep doing it, you have to do it. There's no other way around it. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, and just the amount of time you spend editing the film is and making it worth watching. I would tell everybody, just absolutely go cryptoreality.us and check that stuff out. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the expedition. Obviously not, nobody knows where we're going or when we're going except for us, and won't ever know where we went, as far if we can help it. What do you see, just from what we've talked about in it, what do you see some of the obstacles that we're going to encounter in this?
Well, aside from the obvious, the additional wildlife that's in this area, it's prolific. It's a dangerous area to be at night. It's a dangerous area to be in the day, but at night, it's time to pay attention to what's going on. Right. We've got plentiful wild boar in this area, and I've been charged in this place by probably a close to 300-pound boar. I've personally tracked an alligator that has to be 16 feet. It has a 15-inch back foot. And there are hundreds of alligators in here over 8 foot, probably close to 50 over 10 foot. They go where they want at whatever time they want. Certain seasons, the alligators are predictable in their behavior, but you still have to consider the unpredictable nature of nature. And in that, this isn't a place to play around. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's taken me 40 years of being in these areas to get to the point where I'll even go in at night. And that doesn't even count the new information of what else is in there.
Right.
That's another whole ball game. But the focus on the existing wildlife, the documented wildlife, the accepted, classified stuff that's dangerous, we're dealing with an extreme number of venomous snakes in this area. It's a very wet environment. It's humid. It's inhospitable to human beings, period. It's not a place that you want to be in there thinking about something else. This is something that you need to focus on every step you take. And I say that with the utmost sincerity. This is not a place to be screwing around. Now, aside from that, the drawbacks would be if we have a wet winter. If we have a wet winter, the area could still be flooded. Normally, they're dumping for hurricane season in the late spring. So there's a good chance if we have a normal winter season, that place won't be underwater 2 or 3 feet. If that's the case, then it's a little bit safer. If we're under flood situation and we're waiting, we're in danger every step we take into these areas because of the water moccasins and the bull alligators. In the springtime, the bull alligators are transiting from areas to find females. Thankfully, in this region, there's a congregation point. We've identified that through research of the area. And there'll be 100 or so in there fighting males. It's really something. We may get a chance to shoot footage of that if it happens.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's like nothing you've ever seen. It's like watching dinosaurs fight. And they're doing it, and they don't care that you're there. 10 to 12 to 14-foot alligators scarring each other, killing each other, going after it to be the one to get the females. It's insane. The noise level, the smell, the reptile smell. So there's a chance we may, get some other really interesting stuff. The boar are really the primary consideration. The venomous snakes and the boar are what we need to be worried about because we'll be trying to avoid the really wet areas,
right,
and stick to the fringes of that. The wild boar, if you have any experience with hunting them, anybody who knows about them, they're unpredictable, buddy. They can turn on a dime, and if you're not carrying a firearm, you're going to be fighting off a several 100-pound animal that's very powerful that can scar you for life. That's the bottom line. If it doesn't kill you, they can rip you wide open with one swing of the head, spill your guts right out there in front of you, and everybody
and keep going.
And we'll keep going.
Run by and get you and just keep on going.
Yes, that's well-documented behavior in South Florida. So in the end, it's something we need to be cautious about. I think that a good old-fashioned, I'll give them a good old-fashioned safety briefing on all of this, and everybody's gonna be fine. We're gonna be watching all of what goes on.
Yeah, we're not trying to worry any of our viewers, but we are going to be in this place for a week straight, filming, trying our best to catch the Sasquatch on film. Moving is the object here, is to try to catch something moving. I have no doubt we're going to get them watching us. The peekers, from a distance, sitting out there looking at us, but finding them with that thermal drone and then being able to direct, which is what I hope you're going to be doing, is directing us into the areas where we can actually catch them on the way moving in or out. And that's what you guys are going to get to watch. It's going to be, we're going to shoot it kind of like a movie. There are going to be setup shots, but it's all going to be real time, actual happening, a lot of split screen, a lot of multiple action at one time. But we can't do it. We cannot do it without help. We need your guys' help. And that's what we're asking for. We have the GoFundMe, we have the PayPal. We're asking for $1 from each one of you guys, just $1 a month from everybody that watches this film, and we'll be able to make it. Because it's not going to be worth us going without taking the kind of equipment it's going to take to get this done. That's the constant 168 hours straight filming from 6 different perspectives, actually 8 different perspectives, counting the filming cameras. And the thermal that we're going to have on the ground, one of them, it's $52,000. And we're going to be renting it, obviously, but this is the kind of equipment that we're looking to take. And we've come a long way. We've, in a month, I think we were at $3,600, but we appreciate everybody that donates is not going to have to pay a dime to watch it. Like, we're going to be able to watch all 7 parts themselves. Outside of that, behind the Patreon, it's probably going to cost $1 per episode to watch. We'll work all that stuff out. If we can if I don't have to go into the savings, then we may not charge anything at all to watch it. It's just whatever I have to put in, I want to hopefully recoup. I'm putting in $7,000 of my own money and not expecting to recoup any of that, but that's for equipment that we're going to keep for to continue shooting our documentaries, which we're going Sunday. We're going to shoot with Mike Simmons Sunday in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, right up the road. So you guys are going to have episode 11 of Bigfoot Odyssey coming out probably next Wednesday or Thursday. We'll premiere it. But all right, we'll get back into researching with Mark and Melanie ZASKEY, actually. And you guys, you've done this by yourself for the last 5 years. You've actually added a couple of team members?
Oh yeah. Well, we've been looking.
You got more help, and yeah,
we've got 2 new guys. Captain Brian. Brian is a longtime friend. I grew up with Brian, running the swamps, fishing, and getting in trouble, all that kind of stuff. Brian has been instrumental since he joined the team in using our theories on where to find these things down here to find 2 new research areas. In the one research area, we started to pull the now clear hair samples and the huge track. Brian's done a stellar job with collecting the hair samples. Clear hair. There's one species identified by science with clear hair. That's a polar bear. They're not in the swamps in Florida. So in this area, we're getting unbelievable footage. I've got these things hopping through the bushes on film at incredible rates of speed. We've got them, you've seen a couple of the shots from that particular area, Kerry. And then in addition to that, I got a phone call a couple of months ago or an email from a guy a couple months ago. And he's like, "Oh, I'm in Florida." And I usually try to disregard that because we don't want the liability straight up. You know what I mean? This is really happening. And if we go in these areas, something happens to somebody because we bring them with us, there's a lot of liability in that. And it's just the wrong thing to do. So, but this guy was really sincere. And so I gave him a chance and we started to talk, and his name's Scott. And I gotta give Scott all the credit, man, because he's already been through the ringer in the field with us. Here's first time Scott goes out, and this has to do with the electrical stuff, right? Scott goes out with me to where I had my sighting in the same place, incidentally, that my first sighting in 2013, in the same place that the electrical phenomenon happened. Mm-hmm. And Scott is a tech guy, right? He's got a lot of really expensive equipment, right? So he's got 3rd generation NVG headsets, right? And so I've got this monocular now, and I'm like, this is amazing. We're getting out of the truck, and he's got thermals, and this is like, man, I can't wait to see these things through a thermal. You know what I mean? And we're not 40 feet from the truck, and I'm looking out over the cow pasture that's right by the parking lot for the first time through a night vision goggle, right? This is 3rd generation military technology. And the first thing I see are these lights, these orbish kind of shaped lights that look pretty large, floating around the cow pasture 60 feet off the ground, flashing light at the ground. And I'm thinking to myself, what is this? What's going on? And I was like, then I started to realize these are aerial craft. Something's over the cow pasture, and it's like right there. It was the closest one was a couple hundred yards from us, and still coming closer. But there were several of them. And then right before I said something to Scott, and he actually was the first one to say something, I saw one of them zip and stop on a dime, probably move 60 feet in a blink of an eye. And right then, I was like, oh, God. And I was thinking, this is like the worst possible thing that could happen, right? So I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't see this. You know what I mean? Because it was frightening to me to the point where I was probably going to stop him and say, we're not going in. Because I couldn't even fathom seeing something like this here in my research area that I've been in hundreds of times, man, you know? And so right then, as I was considering that, Scott chimes in. Are you seeing this? And I'm like, what? And he was on my left, and he goes, there's things flying over the cow pasture, right? And he goes, take your night vision off. And I'm like, why? What's going on? And he's like, take it off. They're not there. So I'm like, what? And so I pull it up, and I'll be damned. I'm staring at the cow pasture and the stars in the background, and I'm like, what is going on? And I pull it back down, and the craft are there, floating around, flashing at the ground. He said, real quick, they're using infrared, man. They're using infrared. That's why we can see them doing this. With this thing picks up infrared. Mm-hmm. And he goes, but we can't see it. It's got to be infrared. So he and I were like startled, scared, didn't want to go forward. But right then I had an epiphany. And so I turned on the thermal because I couldn't get what was going on my Canon on the green screen. The IR light isn't powerful enough. And I couldn't catch it. I couldn't see what was going on. I wanted to try to get him on film. So I raised the thermal up, and there's no thermal signature. And right then, it was like I started thinking, whatever these guys are, I think they're drones of some type, but they're using some type of propulsion that does not have a heat load because they were not on thermal either. So naked eye couldn't see them. Thermal couldn't see them. Only with the night vision goggles. And at which point, one of them flew directly in front of us and came towards us and then flashed at us. It shot an infrared. I think they were taking pictures, whatever it was. They got us, and they all moved off. Within seconds, they were moving off into a different area. One of them flew directly where we were headed, which I wasn't too happy about. But at the same time, it was like, this guy came all this way. I'm not going to. So here we go. And we went in. We didn't experience anything after that. We've seen them on 3 occasions to this point. And at this point, man, I'm convinced that what's going on is that they're not any kind of extraterrestrial technology. I think based on what I've seen and the general behavior of the craft, they're obviously intelligently controlled, but they're surveying the area. They've been taking pictures. You can actively watch these craft lower to certain spots, stop over a place, and flashes of infrared strobe, 2 or 3, and then it moves off, and it moves away, and then it stops, and it flashes 2 or 3 times. Sometimes it'll stop, flash once, and move on, but it just appears to be some type of somebody surveying what's going on out there. I think there's definitely some rational explanations for what it is. I think it's our government. That's what I'm going to say. I'm within 11 miles of Florida's Area 51 to begin with, right?
Right.
I mean, Pratt & Whitney has long been they had a secret out there so long in the 70s and 80s. They had their own community, their own schools. It was a town that was shut. It had a gate. You had to have clearance to get in it. It's one of those things. So I thought, I'm attributing it to that kind of stuff because aerial phenomenon in this area, I haven't ever seen anything like this. But then I never wore the goggles before. So my thing is where we're at with this now is we're trying to document those things so we can show everybody what we're seeing first of all. And then, so Scott and I have been working on it. But Scott, unbelievable, man. He started a division of Crypto Reality. It's going to be Crypto Reality Maine. It's going to be a segment every week in our shows. Just did a trip up there, successful. Examined satellite for a couple weeks before we got there. Second day, Scott had an encounter and a sighting with a snow white Sasquatch. went back in the tree line. Unbelievable spot. I caught a few of them on film. I think I had some of that stuff up on the YouTube channel. One of the shots from Maine is on the YouTube channel on the community tab. This shot was taken minutes after Scott saw the white one in the exact tree line that individual went into. So, but
I saw it. It's a big headed ape-looking dude. I saw it. Yeah, it's same thing you get down there.
Yeah.
Now that being said, you have encountered, would you call them different types? Do you think it's the same species, different type? Because some of them look like the 9-footer with the massive 40-pound head and the long upper lip and the heavy brow and the nose across the face. That guy, you get those a lot, but some that look like just a hairy dude, like no hair on the face, looks like a guy, but you can tell the skin is still gray and it just looks like a person. Do you think that it's just the diversity of the gene pool, or do you think that these are different types? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think really in looking at the soft tissue variations between the individuals that we documented in the state of Florida, there's really no other explanation than there's some extreme diversity in the genes. I mean, I've talked with many people about this, several of which are members of the genetic academic community. And in this, these people that are actually willing to have these conversations in a generality, really, because, it's difficult to get academics to have a serious conversation. So I structure the conversations in a way that I can still get the answers I need without blowing my cover, so to speak. And representing, like, let's say, I had a group of primates that showed extreme variation in soft tissue of the faces. That's something that's outside the norm of documented science, right? It's a species. It's spider monkeys. They all, not to be, apes, gorillas pretty much look like gorillas. I mean, there's some variation, but it's not extreme. What we're documenting is extreme. And I think that, I hate to bring up someone else's work, but in the end, these descriptions are what Dr. Ketchum describes, the exact thing. And I've had many conversations with her going back a ways about this. And it's interesting to me that we see the variations we see. It has apparently, based on what we're seeing, nothing to do with sex as far as the different looking individuals. It has more to do with the descriptions in what we see in our work of what she describes. I had a conversation with her one time, and she told me, she said, some of the genes that we've looked at appear to be more archaic or pure. And the ones from the South appear to be more diluted. And there's obviously human involved in that. I mean, that's what she came up with. Several different people have come up with that same thing. So it's not a stretch if it's the question of her research. There's other people who've come up with that same thing. It was on national television on an episode of Monster Quest when the Sasquatch in Canada stepped on the board with the nails, gave the blood sample to the guy he tested. He got unclassified human primate. It's the same kind of thing here, right? So when you're looking at this, I think that's what it is. And it's interesting to me that we do see a much broader variation in what they look like, which correlates to the genes and the descriptions she gave about the Sasquatch samples she tested from the southern part of the United States. So,
yeah, well, connecting dots. Look at the extreme variation in humans. And would you call them different types? Probably not. And get away with it these days. You're definitely not going to be able to. But it just makes perfect sense.
Some of the descriptions you get in, like, say, Sasquatch Chronicles, the amount of encounters I've listened to and the amount of different descriptions of them, they just go from one extreme to another. Not like, I don't think like we as humans are not that extreme, that we have slight differences, but these seem like body and everything can be described completely different. And, it sometimes doesn't make sense. And someone's asking as well about whether you've seen Dogman. And, what do you think about Dogman? Do you think they are a Bigfoot or something completely different, or what's your thoughts on those?
Well, I think more will be revealed. Is what I always think about that. The Dogman thing. I advocate on behalf of eyewitnesses and have for about 10 years now publicly. I've done hundreds of shows and I interviewed people for a long time. And I can tell you that if there's that many people coming out with this, then there's something to it, there's always going to be a kook, man. That's just what it is. You know what I mean? But we're talking about a demographic that is broad of people who have seen these dog-like creatures, these upright, canid hominoids. They're describing hybrids. That's what they're describing. And in looking at that, is it possible hybrids exist? We all know they do. They've been hybridizing several different species for decades. And looking at this, it comes down to the difficulties that we have with chromosomal differences, right? And dogs and hominoids, that's not happening. You know what I mean? So it raises other questions. So, what I say is this about the Dogman phenomenon. I've never caught one of those on film in South Florida or really anywhere I've gone. I've never seen one. And I say more will be revealed. I will eventually begin researching into that in the field, and will apply this with the same tenacity that I have with Sasquatch to that particular subject. And if they're real, if I can track that animal, I'll catch it on film. It's that simple. It's not like what everyone thinks, where there's some kind of a riddle that needs to be solved. I mean, you could call it that, but in the end, it's a lot. I think the difficulties with documenting Sasquatch are more about human perspective interfering, human programming and thinking interfering with very simple biological aspects of the environment. When you can track something, I'm sorry, but it's there. And right. if it's leaving the tracks, what direction did he go in? It's not a complicated issue. It's more about, am I willing to track something that has an 18, 19-inch barefoot? And when you start finding the signs of what these things are capable of, let alone having seen them, most people turn back. So the real issues, and this is one of the reasons why I say, man, Bigfoot research is incidental to what we are really after. What we're after is we're trying to get people to take a look in the mirror. This subject is so overcomplicated, it's ridiculous. The aspects of what we do in research are so basic and so simple, and the understandings have everything to do with basic existence in the wilderness. This is how we forwarded our research to the point we're at now, where we have every aspect of physical evidence, including feces. I've got all of that. You know what I mean? The DNA, the saliva, the hair, multiple individuals' hair. And looking at all of this, it was always something real simple. And the one thing that I've identified in 5 years that is the biggest problem in my research when I'm in the field is me. My perspectives that I have been programmed with to think about this subject still weigh on me and affect the outcome of my expeditions in varying degrees, depending on my level of focus and awareness of self. This is simple. These things are very simple and very easy to pattern. It's, can I get out of my way, first of all, and then stay out of my way? And then you add the other stuff on. I got to learn how to use the technology. I got to do this, I got to do that. Dogman will be every bit as simple as Sasquatch. I can promise you that, if it's real. If it leaves tracks, I'm going to find it. You just follow the tracks.
Right.
If you do it many times, guess what? You walk up on what's been leaving them. And that's what it is. It's a numbers game. You do it until you get it done.
And that's the one thing that we preach is why more people don't know, believe all day long. They're not getting out there off trail looking for these things. They're just not doing it. They're relying on people like you and your research, which I don't see anything wrong with that.
Not at all.
Not a thing wrong.
Not everybody can do what we do, right? I mean,
no, you're right. They can't. But careful what you say about it. You know, if you're not going to get out there and do it yourself, be careful how you approach it and the things that you say to the people that are actually out there doing it. That would be my suggestion to anybody. You don't have to believe. All we want you to do is be aware. When you're out there, you're in the woods and you hear that knock and you hear that strange thing, just consider it as a possibility. That way, if it does step out on you, you're not completely and totally freaked out to the point where you don't go back in the woods anymore. Just consider it. That's all. That's the best. I think that's the best we can do. You know, guys like you out there getting the evidence and getting the actual proof that we're going to need to validate this creature. But outside of that, there's me, the rest of us that are just trying to make people aware. That's all we want. That's it. We have any questions? Let me see.
There's a few. Have you got any casts, Mark?
Track casts.
Yeah.
Any harms?
Yeah, we have several track casts. A lot of what we found was castable. Many castable tracks. The problem with that is that we're finding them all the time, and where something like that is huge to some people. In the beginning, once we cast them, I have personally found hundreds and hundreds of tracks, and I mean gorgeous tracks that you can see the dermal ridges in. And I've been very careful to document those and photograph those diligently. The gait, all of it, and they do have a different gait than modern humans. But casting, I've just I look at it. It's like, okay, that first experience taught me a lot. When you find several hundred Sasquatch tracks from 4 different individuals that have a toddler, and you try to bring enough casting material to do that, you better understand that you're the one who's going to be taking it all out of that swamp. And it's not easy to get into the areas when they're muddy. And so what are you going to do? You're going to make 27 trips with a 5-gallon bucket and or a wheelbarrow? I mean, how are you going to do this? The undertaking is tremendous when you find the type of stuff that we found. So we cast a few of them. The key ones that I was interested in that showed the bell curve, right? Smaller individuals all the way up to the larger individuals. And once I had that, and it basically in the track showed a family group, I stopped casting tracks. We have found a lot of tracks, and I do have my own cast though. Yeah. From our work. And we find them where we catch them on film all the time.
Cool.
Donna Stokes, how did you get saliva samples? I know this one.
Okay, well, in the beginning, I had to figure out how I was going to get these things on film. And so I'm a fisherman, right? And so what do I use? I use lures. And so I was like, I'm going to lure this damn thing to the tree line. And I'm just going to do the best I can, figure out what it wants, and I'm going to give it to it until it comes to get it. And so I was like, okay, this is like real simple, but it wasn't. And so we went through all of this different types of vegetation, and they didn't want it. And they like celery. So we were like, oh, celery, they're on the celery, right? So we were leaving the celery. And really it took about a month, man. The samples didn't start disappearing. They just were there. And we were like, man, and you start questioning, is this really going on? Did I really get hit with a tree branch? Did I really find these tracks? Is this really happening? But you got to keep going. And thankfully we did. We had the tenacity to keep going. And so we eventually figured out, one day I walked up on an apple tree, and it was in 3 feet of water in a swamp. And I'm like, what is going on? Because I'd never seen this before. And I pulled one of the apples, and it was hard as a rock, and they are disgusting. They're disgusting. We call them swamp apples. And so I thought about it. I was like, man, if I had to eat these things, these nasty things, I'd be like really happy if I got a bite of one of these red apples. And that's where it started. So how we got our saliva sample was we spent 17 to 19 months engaged actively in what I would call a Pavlovian style experimentation with these things. And we would every single time do the exact same thing in the exact same place. And my wife would shout the same phrases. They would make noises like they were coming in, and we would deliver the food source. If they didn't behave the way we wanted them to, we wouldn't deliver the food source. And we could hear them banging as we were leaving. Too late is what I would say. Too late. And we would leave. And over time, denying when appropriate and rewarding when appropriate began to produce results in their behavior, and they became predictable. That's when we started catching them on film. And when we did that, we noticed that they were behind us too, which was a struggle then, because when we were shooting the ones that we were dealing with, it was apparent to us that either a couple of those came across the water, the canal, because it's only about 4 feet deep, and got in the bushes behind us, or there was another group. At that point, I'd already been hit by a branch on the side behind us, but it was several hundred yards away. So we didn't figure that they were right behind us, but it turned out they were. And so we set them up. We started leaving a place where we'd leave it. And I thought about how I'm going to do this. What's the DNA trap? How am I going to do this, man? And we chose peanut butter jars. And so we got peanut butter jars, and we left it. And for a month, they didn't do anything. And then I was, throwing them across the other side. And then you could see that the lids were the only thing left. And we still didn't know, though, because critters and all this, one day I was walking in to check the DNA trap on our side, and Melanie and I had a disagreement. Go figure, right? Married couple. Mm-hmm. And so we were going at it. And actually, I think it was my turn. I was going at her. And she said something, and I caught a movement out of my peripheral on the left. And I looked over, and there was something that looked so strange, and it was moving like this, just a little bit, real slow. Like you could see it. It looked like it was kind of floating. And it looked like what I saw on a couple occasions across canal, changing colors. And I thought about it for a second, and then suddenly it hit me, and it was a Sasquatch. I caught the brow ridge and then the eyes. And when I caught the eyes, the face went chrome for a second because the canopy was shifting over it, and the light was diffusing and then not diffusing, and he was in direct sunlight. He was bronze colored, and he was green, and he was bronze, and he had chrome glow, and then it was green, and it was bronze again. And when I saw him, it was like I was looking, and I couldn't tell what was going on. But it was interesting because the last 3 seconds before I recognized what was going on, this dude was looking at my clothes. He looked at my shoes. He was looking down at my feet. He looked at my midsection. He looked at my shirt. And when his eyes met me was when it hit me. And I went, whoa, there's a Sasquatch. And he went real calm and cool. And he just dusted off from the hole he was standing in down into the water. And Melanie was like, what? And we looked, and I was like, he's over by the trap. And I ran over. As soon as I rounded the corner, the trap was sitting right where I left it. The lid was unscrewed. It was sitting on the ground next to the upright container that was 3/4 of the way empty. And I was still bent on catching this individual on film, figuring I could. So I ran down into the water, into the tall grass, and you could hear him bounding. And so I gave chase, and I fell. That was another time the cannon went underwater. Boy, I was pissed. I was so pissed. For about 45 minutes, I played chase around the bushes with this guy. Finally, I gave up, and I was upset, man. And I came up, and Mel was standing at the trap, and we examined it, and we looked, and there were finger swipes in it, and they don't use spoons. So I put the lid back on, we bagged it, and the sample's been frozen, and that's how we got our DNA. But I'll tell you how. The real thing is we didn't quit. We did it anyway. We kept doing it. The raccoons tore it up. This thing tore it up. There were bite marks. Finally, I saw the individual that was at the DNA trap.
Wow.
Awesome, man. That's incredible. There was something you told me that happened to you recently that I think other people need to hear this. And it's when you said you threw up. You actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I mean, you would think.
I know it. Yeah.
You would think. And this just speaks volumes to how emotionally unprepared we are to see these things.
And
we are. Yeah, it speaks loudly to it. So tell us what happened.
Okay, same place that I had the 2013 sighting. Same place as the electrical phenomenon. Same place as the Marines that were trying to kill it when it came out to drink at the canal. Same place I've had trees knocked down. same place I've caught them on film, same place we pulled hair samples, same place you and I found that track, same place we found over 1,200 tracks, all of which we've documented. The same place I've been growled at, the same place I've had eyewitnesses in there with me that have heard dinosaurs roaring in these bushes. The same place I've heard primates sounding like primates. The same place I collected scat where I heard the primates. All of this stuff. Scott comes in, we see the craft. Everything's taken on a new level of crazy. And I'm thinking, God, you know, it's one of those things where you're rubbing your head thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? But the technology and then Scott, you know, and I'm thinking, man, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this, you know? And the craft were freaking me out. And that's no joke, you know. But so anyway, the third expedition we went in. Oh, and I wasn't going to bring Melanie because Melanie doesn't like the nighttime. But when the time started getting close, I started getting oh, you're really going to go without me kind of shit. You know what I mean? And I'm like, it's your choice, man. You know what I mean? And so she was with us. She had a thermal. Scott had a thermal. And I had a thermal. My thermal and Melanie's thermal wouldn't record. Scott's thermal was brand new. He had a scope. Or no, wait a minute. This is before that. We had two thermals, and Mel had my camera. That's right. Scott's thermal recorded, and mine didn't. I had a FLIR. It was nice, man. And I was looking through this. It was the first time I ever had a quality thermal. And I'm looking, and I'm like, man, this is great. We're going to be able to spot them no problem, you know? And I was saying, can I record with this? And he's like, the jack to put record out is bad. So we couldn't record. We leave the car, we take a left, and I'm looking, making sure the craft aren't flying anywhere. You know what I mean? Because this is like a new consideration that's adding to the whole paranoia of being there, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling relieved. And just about that time, Scott goes, I got a thermal hit 450 yards, man, right where we're headed. And I'm like, what? So I look over. Sure enough, I got an upright thermal signature from 450 that looks 8 feet, man. I mean, it's huge, huge thermal signature. And I'm like, oh, God, you know, so here we go. This is the real. You know, that's what I call it, the real. And so we're making our way there, and I'm had the argument going on, you know, because I'm human, you know what I mean? And what am I going to do? And should my wife be here? What if this? What if that? There's a million things. We get down to the corner. We take a right. Now, with a thermal, I'm going to describe this the way I experience it, right? I have the night vision Oculus on one with the headgear, uncomfortable on top of my hat, because if you put it on my bald head, it's doing nothing but scratching me, right? It's like got that hard plastic head weave, right? And then I got the thermal, so I've got night vision and a thermal. And then time to time, I pop it off, and I'm just looking through the thermal. But when you're looking through the thermal and you're in the pitch black, you see what the thermal radius covers, and then there's the blank spots. And so it's very common for me, because I know what's in there, to be peering over to my sides, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I know these things, and I know the spots that they like to be. And so I'm going to check as we go, and God, I hope there's nothing there. Please let there be nothing there. You know what I mean? Because it's right there when it's right there. You know, it's like, you know, these places are claustrophobic, man. It's like, oh yeah. You know, it's like they're right there. And they don't mind being right there, knowing you're coming. And that's the thing, right? That's what I think about at night. That's what makes me not want to pick my cameras up anymore. Because they know I ain't shit. They know it. And that really is something that you have to learn how to deal with when you're seeing them, and you know, and they know, and everything's like all out in the open, and everybody knows what's going on. They know what you're doing, and you know what they're doing. This is repetitive observation, long term. They know me. They know me, and they know my wife. So I'm freaking out, really. And we make the corner, and we're walking, and I'm thinking, okay, I know, because where I saw him, he was in the right side tree line, and there's a trail I'm on, and then there's a ditch about 15 feet wide, and it goes off into a vast swamp. And that's where we track. You've been with me, Kerry.
Yes.
So we're on this trail, we're walking, and the tree line on my right is so thick you cannot see into it. You look, man, and the trees are lit up in this FLIR, and I'm freaking out, man. I'm like, God, please don't let this be right there. You know what I mean? And we're going, and it's like you start getting comfortable again. You're like, there ain't shit. You know what I mean? And you're going, and it's going to be fine. Everything's fine. And then Scott's taking his time, and I'm like, come on, man, come on. Stay close, because if something happens to me, it's going to happen to you. And that's what I want, right? You know what I mean? I'm not thinking bad things. I'm thinking if it's on my thermal, it's going to be on his. Corroboration. He's filming. End of argument, guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we need to do this right, because here's the thing, and this will be a big thing when you come to Florida. You can talk a good game. It's all about execution. This is what it is. It's about execution.
Yep.
And you got to be able to stay there and do the job, man. You know what I mean? So here I am, and now I'm getting comfortable because there's nothing. And we hit a row of bushes on the left-hand side. And I look, and I don't see anything with the thermal. And I got going, and we hit the end of the bushes, and I look, and there's a massive heat signature on the ground. So first I thought gator. Well, then the individual on his right arm lifted up and leaned out. And when it leaned out, I don't actually have the – oh, wait a minute. Actually, I do. It's right here. This is what happened right here.
Mm.
That's the dude right there. He leaned out. Now, he wasn't frowning. Now, put it up there a minute, right? This is what I saw. This is exactly what he looked like, with the exception of I couldn't tell in the brow ridges right here how big they were, because the heat variation was a little different. But the eyes were on fire, and he had just a regular mouth straight across, and then he went like this. And when he did that, that was when my heart stopped, because he was only 18 feet from me. And I went, I got a Sasquatch. I got a Sasquatch, man. I got a Sasquatch, man. Get over here. Get over here. Get over here. And so Scott comes running. Well, first Melanie comes running. I'm like, not you. Back. Stand back. Stay back, babe. Stay back, right? And she'll tell you the same thing. I was like, you don't do that, please. I said, Scott, please don't come over here. So Scott comes over there, and he's filming, but he was filming a little to the left. And he's like, I don't see it. And I'm like, what? And right when he says, I don't see it, another head pops up. And I couldn't tell whether it was a part of the big guy in front of him or behind him. But obviously it was behind him. And it appeared to be 2/3 the size of his head, and either young or female. And then another one came up off the ground. So I think what would happen was they were laying down thinking we were going to pass them.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't, because we had thermal. And at this point, right then, the whole screen in front of me behind the bushes turned red, and it went up beyond the frame of what I was staring through. And they were still there. And the frown, and he was like, he just, you could see he was moving, and I was like freaking out, man. And it's on the film, man. It's not pleasant, to listen to. And so he's can't see this. And I'm going, what? And I'm like, how can you not see this? And then that happens. And what I did was I raised the thermal, and there were several individuals standing, and then the other guys were still on the ground. And they immediately took off and started moving down where we came from. And I thought, holy shit, we're going to die. They're going to jump across this ditch, and they're going to get on this trail, and we're not going to be able to leave. And I said, we got to go. We got to go. There's more. They're trying to come and get us. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm moving everybody. And Scott's like hanging there, and the bushes are breaking. I mean, there is so much noise. All this stuff's going on. They were making noise like you wouldn't believe. They just didn't even care. I was really freaking out, because I was like, Melanie is, what if I'm the only one that makes it out? You know what I mean? Like who's going to believe a word? You know what I mean? Sure. The court case is going to be interesting, because they're going to play every episode of the Bigfoot Researchers Journal as my defense. I got news for you. You know what I mean? Like I didn't do anything to these people if something happened, and all this is going through, and the adrenaline, man, I was freaking out. I thought we were going to die. So we took off. And I was looking at the thermal, and these guys I had to first run, and I was running to catch up with them. Turned out they were just walking. And as I ran past and was looking to my right, they slowed down, and I looked, and I caught a glimpse of about, I would say, between 11 and 15 feet of Sasquatch standing there. in length. They were in a row. You could see the apexes. You could see their apexes. You could see shoulder here bulging. And the one thing that struck me was one of them appeared to have the same exact shape as the one I saw in 2013. It did not look like the rest of them had these apexes. And then there was one that just looked like a giant human head. And you couldn't see any facial features, but the guy I saw had hair in his face. Long human hair in his face. He looked like the cousin It. And so they were slowing down. And I was like, oh God. And then we made it. And we were back, and we were probably 100 yards away, and we started slowing down. And then when we slowed down, I started feeling nauseous. And then it was like everything hit me all of a sudden, man. I was throwing up on the side of the trail. I threw up for about a minute or two or something. And then Scott was laughing because he's like, I'm filming this. And he's like laughing, they're all laughing. It wasn't funny, it was not funny. What it was, and this is something that's never happened to me like this, okay? Because, my jobs in my life have always been real, like, dangerous kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I've been a commercial fisherman, so I've been at sea. I've done a lot of traveling at sea to other countries, through the Panama Canal, down the Pacific, South America, all that stuff. I've been all over the place. And I've been through storms, stuff where you're going to die any second if anybody does something stupid for 15 hours straight. You know what I mean? And the cargo is shifting, and is it going to capsize? And right now, any second we can, all it has to do is shift another foot. We're done. And it didn't. Shit, where I'm like, and I never got anything like this. What I felt was a strong urge to expel a bunch of panic and fear. And I think that's the best way to describe it. You know what I mean? And that's what happened, man. It was way more frightening than anything I've ever been through in the field up to that point. You know what I mean? Way more. That was 3.5, 4 months ago, maybe a little more. I don't know. It was many films ago is the way I look at it. How many films ago was that? Right. it was a while ago. But we did manage to catch an individual on film, Scott. There were other ones in the bushes aside from the ones that I was seeing with the heat signature, and he caught one on the film, the apex, clear as day, at night, going through the bushes, moving. You can see all that in the films,
Man, that's awesome. And hopefully that's what people are going to get to expect and experience from this docuseries that we're going to shoot down there in a few months. And Mark, man, we're 2 hours in. We'll want to have you back whenever you get the site up and going. Whenever you're ready, come back on. We'll talk some more about. I know we could go all night doing this, absolutely. But I kind of like leaving them wanting a little bit more. But 2 hours, two hours has been great.
You know what I mean?
But thank you so much for coming on, and thanks everybody for hanging around. 200 and 300 at one point there steadily. That's a good show for us for live. No telling how many are actually watching. Thanks YouTube, appreciate it. But I know I shouldn't say stuff like that. But no, thank you for everything. And go cryptoreality.us and go look at some of the stuff that Mark Zaskey and Melanie Zaskey have gotten over the years. It'll just blow you away. And you'll hang around. Our moderators are actually putting your website up there right now for people to go to the links.
Moderating tonight too.
Yeah, no, they've done absolutely fantastic, and we'll have links to that in the description also for you guys to go and check out. Mark, thanks for everything. Thanks to everybody that's donated to the expedition. We absolutely love you guys and need your help to get this done. But who we got Saturday, Daniela?
We got another $50 tonight. Thanks to James Lee in the
Super Chats.
No, just straight to the fundraiser.
Oh, well, thank you, James Lee. Awesome. Awesome.
I think we've got Hiker Dave.
Hiker Dave is coming on this Saturday, 7:00 p.m. Central. Yeah. Be right here. Once again, thank you to Mark Zaskey for coming on. You are going to be coming back on here pretty soon. As soon as you get we appreciate it. As soon as you get the website up and going, we'll put that on there.
for you that we didn't get to ask.
Yeah, sorry.
So definitely come back for
but it was still great. Everything you I knew it was going to be great though. So
maybe next time we can do the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll just that's what we'll do. We'll just do a straight Q&A instead of just my questions that I wanted everybody to hear. But it worked out. It worked out great. Good show. Thank you, Daniela, for everything that you do. You're awesome as always. And hope to see you guys Saturday, 7:00 p.m. Central for Hiker Dave. Y'all have a good night.
Good night.